Today I'm going to discuss something that I've been trying with my A-level students to get them to take better notes, but also to retain the knowledge from their notes better. It's based on the principle of Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve. This is the idea that once you've learned something, over time you will lose that knowledge unless you review it. So, for example, if I learned something today and then left it 3 days, I'd lose about 40% of that knowledge unless I reviewed it. If after a day I reviewed it, it could go back to 100%. And if I regularly review it, then it will take longer for me to actually forget that knowledge. It becomes more consolidated. I've often found with my students that once they take notes, they don't look at them again until maybe a year later, and therefore it's hard for them to actually retain that knowledge. This is an attempt for them to regularly review them and therefore retain more of that information. So I've tried to implement a certain type of note-taking with my students. It's called the Cornell Method, and this is what a page looks like. Basic setup at the top where you've got the main question or the title. It can be used for literally any subject where you have to take any sort of notes. And it's got 3 sections. Yellow section, which has got questions or keywords. The main note section, which is in green, where you take your main notes or do diagrams. And then there's a summary section at the bottom. So I've got my students to use this, but I've got them to use it in a very specific way to make sure that they constantly review their notes. So the first stage of this process is the students go and take their notes, either from the lesson or from the video, from the text, and they write their notes in this big note section. So as we said before, when notes are taken, they often don't get looked at again. So the next stage, which happens 2 or 3 days after you took those initial notes in the green section, is what's really important. What I would get my students to do is read through the notes that they've taken already. And then what they have to do in this section on the left is to summarize questions or keywords. So this first section talks about what the actual Nordic model is. This second section talks about the advantages and the challenges. And what I'm getting my students to do is they are reviewing what they've already written. If they haven't written good enough notes, they need to improve those notes. But if they have done them well enough, they can write questions that consolidate and condense them into some key ideas, which is helping them to retain and consolidate that information better. The last stage of the process is 7 days after they've taken the initial notes. They review all their notes, including the key summaries they've done, and then they have to consolidate those into 3 or 4 key ideas of the entire page of notes in this bottom summary section. That again could be done for prep at the start of a lesson, but as long as they are going back through their notes, they've looked at it now more than once in a 7-day period. So to quickly summarize, after writing notes in the note section on day 1, you leave it a couple of days and the students go back, read the work, review the work, and then write keywords, questions or definitions in that left box. You then leave it a couple more days and the students read the whole piece one more time and then they summarize into key points. I found that this makes the quality of their notes better, they retain it better, and they understand why they're having to look at their notes. There's a pedagogical reason behind it.